The year is 1989, and something wicked is about to be unleashed on the world. Japan's economy is soaring, bubble or not, and Nissan is preparing to resurrect a name that hasn't been uttered in 15 years. Three letters that once meant domination on racetracks across Japan: GT-R. But let's rewind for a second. The Skyline didn't start as a legend. It didn't even start as a Nissan. In 1957, a company called Prince Motor built a luxury sedan called the Skyline. Elegant, refined, aimed at competing with European imports. Nothing special, really. Just another car trying to make its mark in post-war Japan. Prince kept building Skylines through the 60s, each generation getting a bit sportier, a bit more interesting. Then, in 1966, Nissan swallowed Prince whole. Merger complete. The Skyline was now a Nissan. But here's the strange part. The Prince engineers kept working on it almost independently, like a secret society within Nissan's walls. Then 1969 happened. Nissan's engineers lengthened the Skyline's nose and dropped in an absolute monster. The S20 engine, inline 6, dual overhead cams, 24 valves, triple carburetors. It screamed to 7,000 RPM and made 160 horsepower, which doesn't sound like much now, but in 1969, that was volcanic. They called it the Skyline GT-R, and it immediately started embarrassing everyone on Japan's touring car circuits. Europeans showed up with their fancy machinery. Americans brought their muscle. The GT-R sent them all home crying. Success bred evolution. 3 years later, the second generation arrived. Nissan wanted it to feel exotic, so they marketed it with these bizarre commercials starring two American lovers named Ken and Mary. The ads were weird, but they worked. Everyone started calling it the Kenmarie. This GT-R was even more legendary than the first, a proper racing weapon wrapped in aggressive sheet metal. But then the oil crisis hit like a freight train. 1973. Gas became liquid gold overnight. Performance cars became pariahs. The GT-R badge vanished. For 16 years, it stayed dead. Nissan kept making Skylines through the 70s and 80s. The R30 looked boxy and sharp, very 80s. The R31 fought hard in Australian touring car championships. But neither wore the GT-R badge. That sacred nameplate sat locked in a vault somewhere, waiting. Nissan was waiting too, waiting for the right moment, the right car, the right economic conditions. By the late 80s, Japan's economy had recovered, money was flowing. Nissan had resources again, and they had something to prove. Their performance division, Nismo, was hungry. They'd been competing in the All-Japan Touring Car Championship, watching BMW's M3 and Ford's Sierra carve up the podium. Enough was enough. Time to bring back Godzilla. The R32, Skyline GT-R, debuted in 1989, and immediately people knew this was different. Under the hood sat the RB26DETT, twin turbocharged inline 6 making an advertised 280 horsepower. That was a lie, of course. Gentlemen's agreement among Japanese manufacturers meant nobody could claim more than 280, so everyone just said 280 and winked. The RB26 actually made closer to 320 horsepower from the factory, but the engine wasn't even the secret weapon. Nissan had developed something called a Tessa ETS, all-wheel drive, but not the clumsy nose-heavy systems others were using. This was intelligent. The R32 normally sent power to the rear wheels, behaving like a proper sports car. But sensors monitored everything: wheel slip, G-forces, yaw angle. The moment those rear wheels started losing grip, the system could send up to 50% of the power forward, instantly. You got the fun of rear-wheel drive with the security of all-wheel drive when you actually needed it. They also added four-wheel steering. At low speeds, the rear wheels turned opposite the fronts for sharper turn-in. At high speeds, they turned in the same direction for stability. It was technological wizardry that made the R32 feel like it was reading your mind. Then they took it racing. What happened next was complete annihilation. The R32 GT-R showed up to the 1990 All Japan Touring Car Championship and won. Then it won again, and again. 29 races from 1990 to 1993. The GT-R won every single one. Ford, Honda, Toyota. They all tried. They all failed. The podium was just 3 R32s in formation, race after race after race. But Japan wasn't enough. Nissan shipped the GT-R to Australia for the Bathurst 1000. The Aussies had their own kings, Ford Sierras and Holden Commodores that had ruled their tracks for years. The R32 showed up in 1991 and destroyed them. Absolutely obliterated the competition. The local press watched this Japanese machine spit flames and claw through corners with supernatural grip, and they gave it a name that stuck forever: Godzilla. It was perfect. The Japanese movie monster, now embodied in a car that was crushing Australia's finest. In 1992, the GT-R won Bathurst again. The Australians had seen enough. They changed the rules specifically to kick the GT-R out of their series. That's not hyperbole. The car was so dominant that they created an entirely new championship, V8 supercars, just a race without it. The R32 even conquered the Nürburgring, setting production car lap records that made European manufacturers nervous. This wasn't supposed to happen. Japan wasn't supposed to build something that could embarrass Porsche and Ferrari on their home turf. But they did. The R33 arrived in 1993, slightly larger, slightly refined. Then the R34 in 1998, the final evolution. These generations cemented the GT-R's mythology. The R34 especially, with its aggressive styling and those iconic round taillights, became the face of Japanese performance worldwide. Which brings us to why any of this matters beyond racing trophies. Because something else was happening in the 90s, something that would turn the GT-R from successful race car into global icon. The world was discovering JDM culture. Japanese domestic market cars were leaking out of Japan, and the world was paying attention. Import culture exploded in America during the late 90s. Kids who grew up playing Gran Turismo suddenly wanted the cars they'd been driving virtually. The Supra, the RX-7, the 300ZX, but there was one they couldn't have, and that made them want it even more. The Skyline GT-R was forbidden fruit. Sure, you could get a regular Skyline in some markets, rebadged as an Infiniti. Boring sedan. Nothing special. But the GT-R? Japan only. The twin-turbo, all-wheel drive monster that destroyed everything on track? Not for you. America had the 25-year import rule. You literally could not legally own one unless it was a quarter-century old. So the GT-R became mythical. Posters went up on bedroom walls next to the Supra and the NSX. Except those cars you could actually see at a dealership if you tried hard enough. The GT-R existed in magazines, video games, and grainy internet videos. It was the car you heard about but never touched. Then came 2001. The Fast and the Furious. Paul Walker's character drives an R34 GT-R in that electric blue paint. And suddenly, every teenager in America knows exactly what a Skyline is. Never mind that the movie treated it like some kind of illegal street racing weapon. The damage was done. The GT-R went from cult favorite to mainstream obsession overnight. Here's what's wild about that cultural moment. The car in the movie wasn't even legal in the United States. They had to get special permits just to film with it. But millions of people watched that film and decided the GT-R was the ultimate machine, even though they'd never see one in person. Meanwhile, Nissan was struggling. The Japanese economic bubble had burst. Sports cars were dying. The R34 GT-R ended production in 2002, and there was genuine fear the nameplate was finished forever. No more GT-R, just boring sedans and crossovers like everyone else was making. Except Nissan had one card left to play, In 2007, they revealed the R35. And they did something unprecedented. They separated it from the Skyline entirely. This wasn't the Skyline GT-R anymore. Just GT-R. A standalone supercar that would be sold worldwide, including America. The automotive world laughed. Nissan, building a supercar to compete with Porsche and Ferrari, the company that was nearly bankrupt a few years earlier? Sure, then they drove it. The R35 GT-R had a twin-turbo V6 making 480 horsepower. It had an advanced all-wheel drive system descended from the R32's Atessa. It had a dual-clutch transmission with launch control that could rocket the car to 60 miles per hour in under 3 seconds. And it cost $70,000. $70,000. The Porsche 911 Turbo it was benchmarked against? Nearly twice that price. The R35 was obliterating supercars on track, posting Nürburgring lap times that embarrassed cars costing 3 times as much. Magazine tests were brutal for the competition. The GT-R would lose in the corners to a Porsche, then explode out of them with that all-wheel drive traction and leave the 911 behind. It wasn't the most refined, it wasn't the prettiest, but it was devastating. Nissan had done it again. Built a car that rewrote expectations. Suddenly affordable and supercar weren't contradictory terms anymore. You could walk into a Nissan dealer and order genuine supercar performance for the price of a loaded pickup truck. The R35 kept evolving. More power, better aero, sharper handling. Track editions, Nismo versions, special models that pushed closer to 600 horsepower. It stayed in production for over 15 years, constantly improving, always delivering more performance than anything near its price point. Which brings us to why the GT-R matters beyond the spec sheets and lap times. This is a car that proved you don't need a prancing horse or a raging bull to build something legendary. You need engineering excellence and the courage to chase performance without compromise. The GT-R rewrote motorsport history. It created an entire subculture of enthusiasts who worship Japanese engineering. It showed that technology and computers could make cars faster without making them soulless. And it proved that the best car isn't always the most expensive one. Today, R32s, R33s, and R34s are finally legal for import to America, and their values have skyrocketed. The cars that were once unobtainable legends are now 6-figure collectibles. People are paying supercar money for 30-year-old Nissans because those cars represent something pure. The moment when Japan proved it could beat anyone. The R35 is ending production soon. Electric powertrains are coming. The world is changing. But the GT-R's legacy is permanent. It's the car that made Porsche nervous, that made Ferrari pay attention, that made every manufacturer realize technology could be the great equalizer. Racing sedan in 1969, to Godzilla in 1989, to a global supercar icon in 2007, the GT-R spent 50 years proving that greatness doesn't come from heritage or prestige. It comes from refusing to lose, from building something so capable that the world has no choice but to respect it. That's why the Skyline GT-R became legend. Not because it was the fastest, or the prettiest, or the most expensive. Because it won when no one thought it could, dominated when it wasn't supposed to, and became immortal by simply refusing to be anything less than extraordinary. The GT-R didn't just change Nissan. It changed what we expect from performance cars entirely. Before the R32, all-wheel drive meant compromise. Heavy, understeer prone, built for snow rather than speed. After the R32, every manufacturer started chasing intelligent all-wheel drive systems that could actually make you faster. Look at what came after. The Porsche 911 Turbo went all-wheel drive. Lamborghini abandoned pure rear-drive supercars. Even Ferrari built an all-wheel drive supercar with the GTC4 Lusso. They all learned from what Nissan figured out in 1989. Computers and sensors could distribute power better than any mechanical system, And doing it right meant you could have your cake and eat it too. The GT-R proved technology wasn't the enemy of driving pleasure. It was the amplifier. Every sensor, every computer calculating tire slip and yaw angles 1,000 times per second. It all existed to make you faster, sharper, more confident. The driving experience didn't disappear under layers of electronic nannies. It got better. That philosophy echoes through modern performance cars. Active differentials, torque vectoring, adaptive suspension, launch control systems that make anyone look like a professional drag racer. The GT-R normalized all of it, showed that electronic assistance could elevate rather than dilute. And somewhere in Japan, engineers are probably working on whatever comes next, carrying forward that same philosophy that made Godzilla roar in the first place. Win on Sunday, sell on Monday. Build something so undeniable that the world has no choice but to remember your name.